It's a huge welcome to the show, Mike and Abbi from TikTok. They are our 2x2 story. Both of them were in the what we're calling 2x2 church. I know there's a bunch of other names like the Cooneites I've heard, and the Way, and the Peace, and the Force. No, I don't think it is the Force. Chewie's a fan of Star Wars, so it could be the Force. I don't know. But Mike and Abbi, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having us on.
You guys, what should we just call it? The 2x2 church? Like, what do we call it? Honestly,
Yeah, we call it the 2x2 church.
Okay. Internally, there is no official name, although they usually refer to it as the truth. And technically, the Cooneites are a different. They're a break-off.
They're an offshoot, eh?
Yep.
Yeah. I know we had that reported over here, and since delving into it, I love the cult conversation. Chewie will tell you as well. I love the religious conversation, and since it's popped up here with Hamish Campbell, one of our MPs, I've been like, well, what's this all about? And it's fascinating that this has gone under the radar for so long. Like I've delved into, there's a church, there's a Church of Christ, the Boston movement in particular, which is a bit of a cult, which has a footing here. And there's, of course, the Scientologists. And it's just, I love it. I love looking at it and reading it and finding out why people believe what they believe. But maybe you could give us I don't know, 60 seconds, 2 minutes, whatever you need, just to give us the nutshell of what this religious group is and what they're all about. Like, what if you were going to join it, what they say it's all about, and then we'll get into what it's actually all about. So what do they say it's all about?
Well, the funny thing is when they're asked, there's not really a very good answer. When an insider is asked, it's usually, well, we are we meet in homes and we follow the Bible and we follow as Jesus' ministry went out 2x2.
And the answer that Hamish gave, non-denominational Christian church, is exactly what the line that we were told.
Although Christian was a word that we actually didn't use very much.
Non-denominational, though, is the term. So it's the ministers go out 2 and 2, like in pairs, and they're homeless and celibate. And they stay or live with the congregants. So they basically couch surf amongst the congregants.
A few nights at a time.
Yep. And so the 2x2 ministry is really the cornerstone of the church. And as you can imagine, having homeless celibate ministers living with the congregants, that brings us into the crisis that's currently plaguing the church right now.
Yeah, that doesn't seem to be a recipe for success, does it? That seems to be a recipe for, scariness. Sorry, Abbi, I interrupted you.
Oh, it's of importance is that it is a very exclusive sect. So if you are not in it, you are not going to go to heaven. If you are in it, you might, if you're good enough on any given day.
Yeah, I mean, looking at what cults are, and we've talked about it a fair bit on the show, the love bombing, the isolation, the removal from your family, that kind of stuff. But that whole, we are the only ones with the truth, that's one of the scariest ones, because that gets you trapped into a cycle of, well, if I leave, then I'm leaving the only people who know the truth. That's terrifying.
Yeah, and if I kick somebody out, then I'm damning them to hell as well. So there's that whole imbalance of like.
Well, we're happy to do that with gay people, but not sexual abusers.
Not abusers, yeah.
Yeah, and this is a part of this conversation.
Yeah.
Is that we'll get into this as we go through, in that they don't remove, it would appear. I found a 60 Minutes interview from the Australian 60 Minutes where they showed some of the stats. We're going to play that during this interview, and they don't seem to remove the offenders, the criminals who are doing this thing. It does feel a little bit like the Catholic Church maybe of 50 years ago, where the priest was doing horrific things and they just moved him to another congregation, as opposed to, moving him into a police cell, so to speak. It's got a bit of a vibe about it.
Yeah, there's definitely a history of just moving people around. Granted, in the last couple of years, there's been increased pressure from both inside and outside the church. So there has been more people removed, more ministers, more elders, more offenders removed from the meetings in the last couple of years. But it's a constant struggle. We're constantly hearing about people trying to push their way back in.
Well, and people trying to push their way back in for those people. Sometimes it's not even the offenders that are trying to push back in. It's like the workers, the ministers are like trying to create an environment where these people can come back. It's very strange.
But it
So
ties back
they're
to the
active,
whole, like, well, they're going to go to hell if they're not going to our meetings.
right?
Right.
So that they're
Getting
actively
involved.
trying to get them back into the congregation. It's not even
Yeah.
like we'll let you stay. It's like we're going to bring you back in.
Right. And I will say it's also particularly easy for these ministers to get moved around because they change fields every year. So each year they are assigned to a field of a certain, region, a few cities or something. And with a certain companion is what they're called. So they're couple, same sex, but, and they are assigned to this certain field for every year. For 1 year, and then they get reassigned to a different field the next year. And so sometimes they get moved to a different state, and sometimes that's fine. Many times that's fine, and sometimes it's because of abuse, and nobody knows the difference. So the fact that people are moving around doesn't even look strange.
Wow. All right. Chewie, mate, I'll talk about this for a week, so I better bring Chewie in or else he'll just sit there looking gorgeous as per usual.
Quite independently of, I didn't know that Pat was setting up this interview. I was watching an interview with another couple of people that had left the 2x2 church as part of the Mormon Stories podcast.
Yeah, that's our friends Kyle and Kari that we run our support group with.
Oh, fantastic. Okay, yeah. That was enlightening. I mean, part of, I guess, the thing of having these ministers moving around, as you said, homeless, celibate, moving from house to house and field to field, there's also, as I understand it, absolutely no record keeping in this church at all.
Yeah, so
there's no accountability,
there's
no paper trail.
No website. There's no maybe there's like a secret binder that we don't know about, but like the records in the past have literally said destroy after using on them.
Wow.
And we have copies of those exact documents, and so we've actually been working for the last couple of years in compiling as many of those documents as we can, because sometimes that's the only way for an abuse survivor to prove that abuser was in their area at that time that they were abused.
Right. So that makes it even easier for a abuser to hide, or it makes it harder for a victim to say they were here then, but how do you prove it? What about when it comes to things? What about when it comes to things like other kind of trackable? Like if you had to do it, does the church believe in cash only? Do they use credit cards? Like, is there other ways to literally figure out this person was in this place at this time?
So it's mostly cash for the ministry, but they also do have trust, because members will leave their estates to the ministry when they die, for instance.
Right.
And so there's millions of dollars in trusts all across the world, but there's no transparency about them, so we don't know exactly how much money. We don't know exactly who's giving it. But then when the workers are staying in the individuals' homes, it's usually just an envelope of money on their pillow, or a handshake with cash in it.
What we might do, I want to kind of go through this in maybe 3 stages. The first is to find out about the church and what it's all about. And then I want to have a look at maybe if you know anything about New Zealand, but what's happened to you this week being pulled into a New Zealand conversation. And then maybe have a look at Hamish Campbell and what, if anything, that means. Because obviously there are a lot of people at the moment going, this MP's part of a church and they pray in his house. What's the big deal? And I guess I'm being genuine going, what is the big deal? And if there is a reason for us to know about it, maybe we'll talk about that towards the end. If that all works with you guys, we are going to be here for 4 hours, just so you know, because that's the process this takes. We're just, before we do that though, we're recording this on Saturday lunchtime, New Zealand. Your mountain time, whereabouts are you? Where's mountain time?
So we are 6 o'clock or 6:11. Yeah,
Colorado.
Colorado. There you go. Chewie, you were there not long ago, weren't you? Up in Colorado?
Yeah, January, not last year before.
Yeah, very good.
Yeah.
All right.
Beautiful.
Let's have a look at this clip. I've just taken 90 seconds out of the 60 Minutes show because it speaks to now what's happened or happening in Australia. So this is Australia, but just an idea as to how this church runs or has been running in Australia.
But the clandestine nature of the church is nothing compared to the terrible secret it hides in some country areas. the sexual abuse of children. Why are there so many pedophiles within this very small church?
There are no consequences of those kind of actions in the church.
The roll call of convicted pedophiles over the last 20 years in New South Wales and Victoria is unbelievable. Noel Harvey, a worker, 19 counts of child sexual abuse. Ernie Barry, another worker, 5 counts. Chris Chandler, the church's counsellor for abused kids, 9 counts.
We'll ask you this at the end, but it does seem strange that a church has a counsellor in specific for abused children and now is trying to basically farm off the fact that this is an isolated, they've actually got a person and that's their role. So we'll ask you about that once this is finished. It's got about 45 seconds to go.
Cecil James Blythe, 13 counts. And Greg Aylett, whose child sexual abuse charges go back to the late 90s. Most are still associated with the church today. For every child sex abuse case that has been prosecuted, how many others do you think remain shrouded in secrecy?
There are an enormous amount of cases. You kind of get this culture of cover-up and protecting the church. We don't want the police, we don't want anyone to really know that this kind of stuff, because it kind of blows the lid on the church.
So, yeah, there you go. So there's just a claim or an investigation by 60 Minutes Australia. Does that ring true to you guys? How do you receive that?
Yeah, absolutely. So right now, 2 years ago, in March of 2023, is when this crisis really blew up. There was a letter regarding one particular abuser in the church that was internal, and we, along with our friends Kyle and Kari, leaked that, and it kind of just started a snowball of survivors coming forward about their abuse by, a ton of different people in the church. And so as of right now, there's over 1,000 perpetrators that have been documented.
Wow.
In the church. And this is a church that is between 75 to 50,000 people. So that's a very stunning number.
And these are dead and alive perpetrators.
Yeah.
So that's of note.
Yeah. I would say probably 75 to 80% are still alive, though.
I always like to clarify that this internal letter was not internal to the entire church. It was internal to like a couple handfuls of people and was not designed to go to the church. So we actually expose this to the church's members themselves as well.
So 1,000 offenders.
Yep. And that's what we know just based on 2 years of this going on. So you can imagine in 10 years, that number is going to be significantly higher once things really, get more word out about it.
And many have passed on without being able to name their abusers. Without this, before this happened, there were many people who were abused and never got to say anything about it.
And as we've just seen that report from 60 Minutes in Australia, 1,000 abusers, imagine the number of victims if the abusers are getting 13 and 19 charges. If you're getting 13 charges, you've committed a crime 50 times. It's never going to get all of them. So
absolutely.
Yeah, that's horrific. It feels like you guys are kind of the Leah Remini then of this show. What she did for Scientology with her show, you guys have been the ones behind outing a bunch of this stuff.
I mean, it hasn't been just us. There's definitely been it's been a huge group effort by largely people outside of the church and a few inside. But it's been quite a couple of years.
Well, the research that you're doing, or the offenders that you've found, are any of them New Zealand based in New Zealand? Once you've been going through it, do you know of anything? Obviously, we're not going to do names purely because of our legal recourse they may have. But through what you've found, is New Zealand on the list?
Yeah. So I mean, we personally have compiled our own list. There's also other groups out there, a couple other groups that have compiled their own lists. Our list, which is certainly not comprehensive, has 14 people from New Zealand. I just talked to Jillian from the Brave Truth, who is she runs a hotline for Australia and New Zealand for people to report to, and said that about 50 people are on her list from from New Zealand alone, and about 140 from Australia. So combine that to be around 200 between the two countries.
That's horrific. I think, Chewie, you jump in a sec, Chewie. I want you to be a part of this. But I think I'm speaking on behalf of us. One of the things that we try and do is we try and bring a fair and equitable conversation. We often delve into politics and news. And what we're finding in New Zealand, like I think the rest of the world, there is a conservative right/alt-right group at the moment going around doing things like rainbow story time, groomers, pedophiles, da-da-da-da-da-da. How many pedophiles have been convicted from rainbow story time? Oh, 0. And there's other groups, some of them church groups, who are have a disproportionate number of pedophiles or sex offenders in them compared to the drag queens who are reading to kids. And I guess we're pushing back against that. And that's probably a part of the genesis of this conversation, not specifically rainbow story time, but in general, there is this element within the political world that will point to people who are marginalized or different and say bad, whilst they are supporting a narrative, whether it's a religious narrative or a political narrative, which actually these things are happening in those areas. Is that fair, Chewie?
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good rundown, and it's been very, very clear in the past couple of weeks with what we've been doing around Benjamin Doyle and Destiny Church and stuff like that. I think the thing that I want to touch on here is if we're talking about potentially 50 people that are on a list of being potential abusers within this church, and the news story that I read that said that there might be maybe 1,500 people in this church in New Zealand, and that people are moving from house to house to house to house, the chance of the national MP that we're talking about, Hamish, being completely oblivious to this would have to be pretty small, wouldn't it?
It would have to be 100% willful.
Yeah, and I mean the numbers, again, no record keeping, right? So the numbers are pretty switchy. I think between 2,500 and 2,000 in New Zealand is probably the closer estimate. But I mean, still, it's really small compared to the number of abusers and the number of the number of victims that are out there in the New Zealand community.
Well, on that vein, like we did some calculations based on what we know and only what has come forward. And like you were saying, when people point to other groups, historically, this church would often, when abuse would come up, so, well, every community has that problem. The way is perfect, but the people aren't, was the line. And according to what we have crunched, just based on what's come forward in the last couple of years and the spattering of things that came forward before that, the number of abusers amongst the male members of the ministry, so we're comparing apples to apples, the male members of the ministry from 1950 forward, because that's what we have the best data on, the number of abusers is 5 times higher than that in the Catholic clergy.
Wow.
Jesus. Well, because I mean, around the story with the MP that we're talking about here in New Zealand, we've tried to be very fair, and we were like, this, the story's a bit of a beat up. This guy's part of a church, all of that sort of thing. There's nothing tying him specifically to this. But as we sort of dig deeper, we're like, well, really, the story is what is going on in this church that this lawmaker is part of. And I think, the words that are used that you've described, that like, hey, look, this is chapter and verse what people are told to say. It's he's described it as being socially liberal, whereas everything we've seen goes, it looks super patriarchal for a start. And then you add in the aspects of, yes, there's no record keeping. It's a very exclusive club. It's all lining up to be not very good at all.
Yeah, and we don't know Hamish personally, obviously. We don't know what his views are. like there are some liberal people in the 2x2 church. They were far and few between, but we do know of them, right? And they kept it pretty quiet because if their peers knew that they, if they were pro-abortion or any of those
LGBTQ.
pro-LGBTQ, it might be a little bit uncomfortable on Sunday morning.
Am I right in thinking that this is kind of like an offshoot of the Mormon Church?
No, it has its roots in Ireland. There was an evangelist in Ireland. He started it, and it broke off from another Irish group called the Faith Mission. So it has its roots in like kind of evangelicalism.
Maybe what we can do now, seeing we've evoked his name a few times, and I just want to also say again, I think the reason where Chewie said being fair, but what we're saying in this is if these things are lining up, then it's a serious thing. We don't know if those things are lining up for Hamish in particular. He may be a nominal member. He may be a highly involved. We don't know any of that information right now. But let's have a look at the story. There's two stories. One is when Mikey, one of our political reporters, caught up with him about it. And then 24 hours, there was a question to the Prime Minister about it because he is part of the governing party at the moment. And let's just have a look at this together.
Hey, can we talk to
Hamish Campbell MP in the Christchurch seat of Ireland is a father, a doctor and a member of a secretive sect known as the 2x2s or the Truth.
Look, I have an association through my family. I've also been a scientist for the last 20 years, so I have quite a broad worldview, so socially liberal. So,
how would you explain that organisation?
Oh, look, I think it's a non-denominational Christian group, just trying to live the best way possible.
The church, with no official name, is under investigation for child abuse.
Can we clarify that? Is under investigation for child abuse where? In the US and Australia?
So the main investigation is happening with the FBI in the United States.
I don't know if it's fair to say it's the main one, but it is probably the largest one.
The largest one. And go ahead.
Yeah, I mean they're coordinating with their counterparts in all of the other countries that have had anything really come up. So it's pretty rare for the FBI to publicly announce an investigation, but they did that. When was that?
February of last year.
Okay. And they had even a questionnaire on their website. If you go to the website, fbi.gov/2x2, which is a really bizarre landing page to see, it is about this investigation. And there was a questionnaire that you could submit. That's no longer up, but you can still submit. They're still very, very active. And I know the RCMP in Canada is very, very active, and there's definitely a lot going on.
Yeah, I'm not sure what
countries.
I'm not sure what the FBI equivalent is in New Zealand, but I can't guarantee that they have been brought into this, but it would be very surprising if they hadn't.
I think the equivalent is a couple of farmers out the back of equivalent. Well, let's just get, because Hamish pops up in the story one more time. Let's just get through that, and then we'll keep going.
Police in New Zealand have been speaking with current and former members, with one support group claiming 50 perpetrators have been reported to them.
Look, I think kind of for any accusations like that, I think the best place for that is the police.
Does it concern you?
Oh, look, I think once again, as I say, if anybody has any concerns, that's a matter for the police. Their best place to deal with that matter.
He's since told One News any allegations of sexual abuse must be thoroughly investigated. The church last night saying...
That'll do for now. They go on to a bit about the church, but we've got the experts here. When you hear an ex-Scientologist speak, they will tell you what current Scientologists will say word for word, because there's a learnt script and they know exactly what. You hearing Hamish speaking, did that sound very familiar to you?
I can't say that there's a learned script necessarily, but there is kind of an unspoken script that people kind of, especially when you grow up in it your entire life, you kind of absorb the script by osmosis. So, and also he's a politician, so he's giving kind of those, non-answer answers.
Yeah.
And, saying something like, redirecting to, it should be reported to the police is a pretty common line. And you notice that he was asked are you concerned about it? And his response was, I think you should take it to the police. Not like, yeah, I'm concerned about it.
Right. Because let me say again, that 50 that was mentioned in that story is 50 in New Zealand. You say 140 in Australia. So if there's 1,500-ish, 2,000 people, what's that? It's four, no, what would it be? 10% would be 200. So it's like 2.5%, 50 of the church. Because you said earlier,
and there may
someone
be
said
like
five times the number of Catholic accusations since the 1950s. But then you have to think the Catholic accusations would be hundreds of times higher than the general population. So then there's going to be the general population, then a massively more percentage in the Catholic Church, and then a massively more percentage on top of that in this church.
Yep.
Yeah, and the Catholic Church has had decades really for people to come forward. This has been a big thing. They've had massive news coverage, lots of like legal representation for people who come forward. It's very approved for people to come forward now, and has been for a while. And so that's really going for them too. So who knows what this will be like in 30 years, but only if enough exposure comes to the church that people know that they can come forward. And that's a huge part of our mission.
Yeah. I'll just play the next story is only 49 seconds. It's the night after on the news when the Prime Minister was asked about what he knew about Hamish's association.
Inquiries into the group, which has no official name. The Ilam MP saying he has no personal knowledge of the individuals involved. Christopher Luxon says he found out Campbell was in the church through the media and not the party's vetting process.
We have a vetting process, and I'm very, I'm confident in the process. But I don't know whether we asked explicitly what religion people are, whether they're Catholic or Protestant or have faith or no faith.
The Prime Minister says that people who experience abuse from any organisation should report it to police.
So there you go. There's that aspect of it as well. Something for you to go know if you don't know. Christopher Luxon, our Prime Minister, is an evangelical Christian. He has been quoted to say abortion is, quote, tantamount to murder. So that's the religious perspective he's also coming from. Any thoughts around what you've heard the Prime Minister say in response to the outing of Hamish Campbell, if I can use that word?
Yeah. The Prime Minister is giving kind of, the typical answer. And the fact that, he says, I don't know if they ask about their religious affiliation. It is on the website, I believe. Hamish Campbell is listed as, again, non-denominational Christian. So that was the line that he used when he took his position. So, yeah, I'm not surprised that they wouldn't dig any further. When they get an answer like non-denominational Christian, they'll just be like, okay, enough said, moving on. And there's no name. It's not like he's certainly not going to say, oh yeah, I'm a member of the 2x2 church, because he doesn't know it as the 2x2 church, or at least doesn't admit that that's the name of it.
Can we just check in again? Does anybody know, Chewie, as how associated he is? I know that you guys said in one of your TikToks, my family has an association. Could be anything from, if my cousin was Jewish, then my family has an association to the Jewish community. Yeah. But we have heard that the events have been happening in his house. So does that therefore mean he has to be heavily involved? Like, do we have any idea as to his tacit connection? Absolutely, he's in there and knows everything, or do we know at all?
So here's what we know, and this we have to rely on sources for this, right? Because we don't know him personally, but according to our sources, which are the same sources that TVNZ used, he is an active member and has the church meetings in his home. And you do not have meetings in your home if you are not a very active member.
And you have more, you are in a certain position of, I don't know if I would say power or authority. Sometimes certainly it establishes as power or authority, but influence. There's a certain status of being what they call an elder for having when you have a meeting in your home. And you certainly know typically more than the average member.
And is it possible that he left a year ago? It's possible, I suppose.
A lot of people have.
but yeah, there's been a ton of people leaving the church recently. But his responses don't indicate that, because usually people who have left this church are going to be pretty upfront about.
Yeah. It's not like it's a big voting base in New Zealand if there's only 2,000 people, so you don't have to worry about pissing them off.
No,
the other thing is,
not.
from my very small knowledge about how a family is run, the male is the head of the household, is the boss, is in charge. So therefore, he's not going to therefore go, well, they meet in my house, but I'm not really involved with it, but my wife is. I mean, that's not going to fly within that church, is it? So if it's happening in his house, then he must be the boss of the house according to that religion and have the say over what happens in there.
Yeah, most likely. I mean, it would be very surprising if his wife was a part of it, and that's why they had the meetings in their home.
Women are not elders.
No. So like
ever.
Sometimes it does happen where like a widow will have the meeting in her home, and like one of the attendees that's male will conduct the meeting.
He will be the elder, but that's only really if there's no other home.
Yeah.
Chewie, I've got one other question, and I'm going to play one more clip for my one other big question. There's a lot of other things we could talk about, but I want to nut down on one more thing. Before I go there, Chewie, is there anything else you want to ask? It doesn't mean the conversation's finishing. I'm just saying I want to get to one last question.
Yeah, no, you go ahead with your question.
Okay. So the big question that we obviously all want to know is, does it matter if one of our lawmakers, one of our MPs in our ruling party, the equivalent of a Republican in America at this current time, is a part of this church? Because what we're having, can I say, the other side, the people who were very vocal about a Green MP in New Zealand and his particular failings and what that all meant, are now saying things like this and being very dismissive of Hamish Campbell. Oh, this doesn't matter. This is what they're saying.
They will be following the mainstream media's amazing misdirection this week. Someone had a prayer sheet meeting in his house, this guy Hamish Campbell, and he is like the devil incarnate. What a look over there piece of diversion that was, Leo.
So he's saying that there was all this coverage of another story in New Zealand. I don't know if you know about it or not, but someone from the opposite side of the political world, being basically told he was a groomer and a pedophile and these sorts of things. And then when this story comes up, the side of the argument that was screaming that from the rooftops is now saying, well, the only reason this is a story is for a diversionary tactic. It means nothing. So what we're trying to figure out is, does it mean nothing or does it mean something? And I think that's the question that New Zealand wants to know. Yeah,
I think that it depends. Like Hamish's response said a lot. And in terms of whether it is something or nothing, I mean, go ahead.
Well, and to be fair, I don't really blame anybody for feeling like this is nothing, because they don't know the 2x2 church. They don't understand any of the context. So I can get why people are like, this seems like just an attack on somebody's religion. And I get where that comes from. Where it goes to like, are you paid by the Green Party is like a whole other leap that's hilarious. But yeah, I can understand that unless you actually get context or seek it out.
Yeah. And I don't think that it's necessarily a problem that he is a part of the church. At least my personal problem is with the answers that he gave, which were very misleading. Assuming that our contacts are correct and he is an active member and has it in his home, to say that he has an association through his family is a complete
it's a lie.
It's almost a lie. And what was the other thing that he said? Well, he also said that I don't know about it other than what I've heard in the news. And we have sources that say that he definitely knows about it because they are associates of his and they have been abused.
Yeah.
Wow.
I think the I totally had a thought and it's gone. But we were going with
we tend to have that effect on people, Abby. So don't worry.
What was wrong? What's wrong with him being a part of that?
Yeah, is it a story or not? Is it a big deal or not?
Yeah, I think that if he had said, "Oh yeah, I am a member. I feel awful about the things that have come out, and I hope that we can get justice for all of them," that would have gone a long way. Like this would be a non-story if his response had been that. I mean, people still might be like, "Oh, he's actually a member of the 2x2s. We should probably maybe we'll research the 2x2s a little bit." But just being a member doesn't mean you support pedophiles or anything like that.
We have pretty much all of our family are still members. So let's be clear that like this doesn't mean that they're bad people. What I was going to say is that his answers indicate what he knows deep down about the church he's a part of. His answers of like distancing himself from it, or answering, I have family connections, but I'm also a scientist. And I also have these other views, tells me exactly what he knows about the church he's attending. He knows very well that is a complete counter to scientist, socially liberal.
That's an excellent point.
I'm going to ask another question. And because we're terrible at our job, I should have probably asked this as the first question. If this is the only connection, seeing this, that someone in New Zealand is going to see about the 2x2s, what's the one or two things they need to know, which are the biggest concerns, the biggest red flags, the things that if you had someone in an elevator to warn them about the church, what you would tell them?
Well, one thing is that it looks very wholesome on its face, and it will feel very wholesome to many people who aren't noticing the abusive practices, not just sexual abuse. This is just a very abusive doctrine, a very abusive environment, and you may not notice that.
On the outside, it looks like a Norman Rockwell painting.
Yeah.
And once you get past that initial layer, you realize that the ministry is a cult in its own. It's like a cult within the cult. It's very hard to get out of. These people devote their entire lives. They sell everything that they have, and they become a homeless celibate minister. And then sometimes they realize at 50 years old, oh, this is not what I want to be doing. And then they're 50 years old with no job history for the last 30 years, no education.
No support if they leave the church, for the most part.
Which is kind of a tangent to a lot more than an elevator pitch. But
the Norman Rockwell thing, even it's I think worth mentioning that when we left the church, we actually left because we had a faith crisis. We didn't even leave because we realized how bad the church was. So we actually before we left, we entertained staying and faking it for our whole lives for our future children's sake, because that's what we wanted them to grow up in. It looks like the best environment for your kids on the surface.
And Abbi, how did it feel the first time you got to cut your hair?
Yeah. I mean, I just got chills just now.
She transformed.
Yeah.
Was it empowering to take? Because you're not allowed to cut your females don't cut hair, in the church.
No, not typically. And it's a little bit different in different areas, but that's definitely a core issue.
Definitely don't cut your hair like this. Maybe you get it like cut down here.
And that's more recent. In more recent years, this might be acceptable. And so I kind of had it shorter and shorter over time. And then one day, Mike said, "Do you think you'll ever just cut it like really short?" And I was like, I feel like I have to at least once in my life. And he said, you should do it. And I think I did it later that day or like the next day.
Our kids didn't recognize her at first.
And I
Chewie,
have never felt more like myself.
Anything else, Chewie, you want to throw out before we head off?
Look, I'd just like to thank you for coming on the show and running us through this. I think most New Zealanders are quite happy to let people we're like religiously ambivalent. Like,
right.
If people go to church, that's all cool. It doesn't matter what church it is. That's fine. But religion isn't a centerpiece of our society. So I think the instant reaction is like, well, let them do them.
Yeah.
But I think talking to you guys, there's a lot more to it that we should pay attention to.
Yeah, and I'll say that our video, the reason that we did the video wasn't necessarily for New Zealanders. Much of our audience is ex-2x2s, and it is really fascinating for us to see a 2x2 in government. That's very, very, very rare.
Yeah, there's like one state representative in Wyoming here in the United States, Jeff Williams, and like that's the only other one we know of.
I don't think people even know about him either. Like I'd never heard about it until the other day. So it's very, very rare. It's not super like approved career necessarily, politics. So anyway, it's fascinating to us, and we recognize that most of the stuff that's fascinating to us isn't going to be interesting to anybody else. But this hit other people that were fascinated for different reasons. They don't understand what the audience was.
And this is a different church. Like if somebody says they're Catholic, everybody's like, okay, they're Catholic. If somebody says they're Lutheran or Protestant or whatever, everybody's like, okay, no problem. And that's why people are like, why is this a big deal? Because this just sounds like another Christian church on the surface.
Yeah.
Hey, Warlock, thanks so much for giving us some time this morning. We just put your the algorithm worked because it found me. I mean, I wasn't following you guys and it popped up into mine and I looked at it and I was like, oh, wow. Okay. If people want to follow you, it's our 2x2 story on the TikTok. Is there any other places you guys have stuff up for people to find out about? Or if anyone's listening from the church, as unlikely as that may be, is there any other place you want to send them?
So I mean, we do have some stuff on YouTube. If you Google X 2x2 support group search for it on YouTube, you'll find it there. We don't have a ton, but we do have some interviews with cult experts on there that we've done.
Yanya Lalick and Steve Hassan.
Yeah. If there's any ex-members that are listening to this and they want to find a place for more support, the X 2x2 support group on Facebook is open to all ex-members or people that are maybe having second thoughts and are in the process of leaving. We welcome them as well.
Well, thanks.
This is
thanks so much for giving that. Yep.
If anybody wants a deep dive, I'm going to put my face next to it. Into the history of the church. This is like more than you ever probably want to know. It's fantastic. If anybody is super fascinated by that, preserving the truth.
Might as well show people while we're here.
And Chewie had mentioned it, the Mormon Stories podcast with Kyle and Kari. So part 1 is out. Part 2 is coming on Monday, which they're going to talk about really most of the abuse crisis in that section. So it's worth checking out. They do a really long form interview. It gives a lot of information.
Yeah, I'm about maybe a third of the way through at the moment. I was like, oh yeah, I'll just dip into this and see what it's about. And I'm like, oh wow. And so yeah, pretty invested.
There's also a Hulu, like a short form documentary on Hulu.
Well, it's been a pleasure having you guys on. Thanks so much for saying yes. And we will stay in touch and keep an eye on what's going on.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you very much.